Good day to you. This is Tony Ballinger from the Fighting Men of Rhodesia YouTube series. My guest today is Mike Hines. He was a sapper in the engineers. Mike, nice to see you. You're over there in New Zealand. What's the weather like?
Raining at the moment.
Ah,
Nothing new.
yeah. It's much like England, I guess.
Yeah,
It's
correct.
it's chilly here, but clear and sky with the odd bit of cloud. So, Mike, to start the ball rolling, as we do in all interviews, give us a 5 minute overview of where you were born, where you were raised, went to school, and how you ended up in the engineers.
Okay, I was born in Bulawayo and Martyrdale Hospital. I then went, my parents then moved backwards and forwards between South Africa and Rhodesia a couple of times. But we then settled in Salisbury, and I went to school at Ellis Robbins High School. And then my father had an electrical and refrigeration business in Mablerain, in Stortford Parade. A lot of people knew them. They were called Current Electric. And of course, there were four boys in the family. And we had junior school. We went to junior school first at Alfred Bart and then on to Ellis Robbins. And then obviously I started an apprenticeship with him, and then I did a bit of tech with I think everybody will know Ray Mort, the rugby player. We were tech together. Quite a naughty bugger. I remember the night that we all went out drinking, and he got involved in a bit of a argy-bargy with one of the guys from the Rhodesian rugby team, Blondie Harris, and he got knocked down the stairs at the cocktail. Um, Ray was a hard bugger, so he got back up again, and everybody else went out and had a party. He shook hands and went up. So we had a fantastic time as teenagers. I would say that it was really the best time of my life as a teenager. We used to ride around on motorbikes. I'm afraid the guys were in either Land Rovers or those old Peugeots, and by the time they woke up, we were in the next town on a big motorbike. So we had a good time. Then the army came along, and there was we went through a few issues. I got called up and went to Llewellyn Barracks. I did my initial training with infantry, and then as I'd said with a brief run up, I thought somebody suggested, I don't know who it was, suggested that it would be good to go into engineers because all they did was drive around on boats all day, and that seemed pretty cruisy. But that was the least of it. Engineers was more about anti-personnel mines, explosives. We did a small boaty course. We did a boat building course. We did a boat bridge course. We learned about other things quite a bit, and then they shipped us off to the border. And I was in a number of areas: Chipinga, Nyabanda, Mount Darwin, Mukumbura, these sort of areas. And we started out where the guys were given and I was chatting to one of the guys recently on Facebook about it. We were given this massive big grader they called spinner corp, which they'd put pads on to obviously sense mines along the roads, border roads. But the trouble was, it took so long. It took about 2 days just to get down one small road. So that, of course, everybody knew it was coming, and that wasn't really of any good. They then went to a vehicle called a Pookie, which I was one of the drivers. I had a VW motor, and they had pads in the middle of the bodywork or closer to the floor, and we sat inside with headphones. Only problem is it was too sensitive. We picked up a number of bottle tops on the road before and after a lot of the villages. So we had to, that was obviously a problem. But I never found any mines with it. I had a short period with it. One of the other guys I was speaking to on Facebook did. And they were very effective as regards a first time being designed and manufactured in Rhodesia. And I believe there's a whole story behind that, which I haven't had a chance to chat to the guys about. They had big Formula V fat tackies on it, and it looked quite a nice vehicle to drive. It was, but obviously it had its purpose. And that I ended up at Mount Darwin with that. Then after that, I went to Mukumbura, and that was where we really started as regards anti-personnel mines. There were two types of anti-personnel mines that we laid. One where we were laying in teams at that stage. one team would actually do the fencing with the Dennett coils, and then the guys would come in one team and actually dig the hole and drop a mine into it, anti-personnel mine. The next team would then peel off behind them and arm the two types of mines. And then, of course, there was the well-known Mukumbura chop, which you hit the sand with your hand and it covered the mine with the sand. That was a lot of guys knew about that. In the meantime, the guys that I was with in different areas had got a hold of a pig, and this pig was a pet pig that used to run up and down the minefield road. It drank beer, and and one particular instance was that the police were camped near us, and Flash, as he was known, went and had an argument with the police Alsatian because he wanted to get on the camp bed, which was the sergeant. We had some good times. As I said, we really, every time we went out to get our food and our provisions from our dole, we would come back with whatever we could lay our hands on, being beer or whatever, which really wasn't allowed, but we were a small enough stick. So being engineers and a select few, we had our own staff sergeant or corporal that would look after us, and we'd get away with things. As I said, a lot of the guys got into all sorts of things, smoking a bit of wacky weed, which try to keep the boredom away. We would go out, we would load up the trucks the day before, and then go out early morning, lay mines till about 7 o'clock or just as the heat was starting, because you had to be careful you wouldn't make a mistake. You had these mickey flies in your face, so you're wearing nets over your face and head, and of course it got hot, so you couldn't carry on laying when it got too hot. You would have to come back to camp. So from later on in the morning, you just loaded up the trucks the next day, and then you really didn't have much to do. So I would say I lost about 50% brain cells just lying around or smoking wacky weed, which is not the best.
For our foreign viewers, this is a minefield that you were laying along the Mozambique border. Is that correct?
Correct.
And
along the Mozambique border.
You mentioned two types of mines. There was the anti-personnel that went in the ground and the ploughshare that was put about 3 feet above ground.
Yes, the ploughshare we'd manufactured the ploughshare with quarter-inch steel in the barracks back in Salisbury, and glued in the quarter-inch steel onto the ploughshare, and then that went on a tripwire. The other type, there was actually two types of the smaller anti-personnel. I believe they were one. I actually don't know where they were manufactured, but one was it had like a clear spin wheel on top, and you put the det on the side and tape and close that in, and then spun the wheel off, and the mine was armed. The other type was one that you screwed the det in the bottom, and on top was a string that you pulled the string, it pulled out a pin, and that was armed. So that is the main two. I believe they're about 4 pounds pressure to set off, but my memory is that was quite a long time ago.
How I've seen the ploughshares because I walked through the minefield going through Crook's Corner, and I could see the ploughshares left and right of me. How was that wire stretched without sitting off the ploughshare?
Good question. Good question. I think that was quite a tricky thing to do. I'm actually not too much of a favour with that. I spent a lot of time more on the smaller anti-personnel mines laying into the sand. So I didn't have to do the plough shields that much. I did help in manufacturing them with the quarter-inch steel on the side of them, little pieces of quarter-inch steel cut and stuck on the inside of the plough shield.
And the foot mines were laid in a pattern that would be recorded so that an engineer could walk in 4 paces forward, 3 to the right. He knew exactly where he's going. Is that correct?
No. When we were there, chaps just laid in a cluster. In other words, in 3 of them in a cluster at 9 o'clock and 12 o'clock. And that was basically, there was no sort of recording as such, as far as I could remember. What I did hear about at a later stage, which actually really frightened me, was I never saw it done, but I believe there was guys who actually breached the minefield and pulled sand between their legs and breached the minefield with bayonets to flick the mines out the way so that they could bring SAS or Zulu scouts through because there's many a time that the guys would get a call on the radio saying, we've got 4 gentlemen standing at the other side of the fence in Mozambique. Nobody knew where they'd come from, and they are Salute Scouts. Well, they wouldn't say it over the radio, but obviously these gentlemen needed to come back into Rhodesia. And there was obviously this casual gentleman with cut-off sleeves, shorts, and sort of shotguns or whatever they had, SKS, and would casually saunter across. Then the guys would bring them across and relay again after they'd brought them over.
And the fence was double strand, wasn't it? One in Mozambique, facing the border, and one inland. How wide was the minefield, Mike? About 75 meters or so.
Yes, that was I think that was called cordon sanitaire, but that was when in certain areas, and they couldn't get to all the areas, but certain areas it was monitored. So if any of the strand were cut, it would then register, and then they would send out a stick to see that particular area. But I think we were laying it so fast that and such a big area that it was difficult to really do the whole areas, all the areas that we were busy with. There were specific guys who knew what they were doing as regards to fencing and putting up monitors on the fence or sensors on the fence as such. Our entertainment on Saturday afternoons would be to watch, any afternoon, to watch buck that would get under the fence and run up the minefield and set off a few mines. And then, of course, the vultures would come in, try and eat as much as they could of that particular animal. And then you'd hear, they would try and get out the minefield and would hit a mine themselves because they were too heavy. So that was our afternoon's entertainment.
I remember at Vic Falls, when they put a minefield around Vic Falls, the same thing. It took weeks and weeks and weeks for the animals to settle down and get familiar. The vultures would pick on something that had a big fat belly. They'd flap up a few feet and then land on a tripwire of a plowshare. And their feathers, and I've never seen so many vultures in my life for the first 3 or 4 weeks.
Oh, gee, shame. It's just terrible. As I said, we actually had elephant arrive at the fence and start kicking the fence on the other side, on the Mozambique side, and guys shot in the air to frighten them off because we were so worried that they would get into the minefield, but they weren't happy about the fencing and that sort of thing. But fortunately, while I was there, I never saw anything, any big animals like that hurt.
Yeah, we had a elephant that got into the minefield, blew the front of its trunk off, ran back into Mozambique, and killed my sergeant, Rob Hickey, crushed him to death. So it's very sad that the loss of life, both animal and human, from the. Do you know? Did you ever see any tours or hear about them getting killed in the minefield?
We were busy laying at Charlie and near Charlie, and when I say busy laying, the guys had just done the fencing. We hadn't armed any mines or put any mines, and across from us was from one gomo to the other. We could see there were gentlemen moving about in camo. Now we were told that they were for Lima, and we weren't to take any shots at them or do anything as yet until we had orders. So the guys casually carried on doing what they were doing, finishing the fencing. The next minute, there was one shot rang out from their side. Of course, our guys were pretty worried and took a dive through the fencing. So a couple of guys got scratches and cuts and that sort of thing. But it was just one shot that they took a shot at us to sort of give us a warning. But that was any time we had any real issues with them there. We did hear often. We used to hear on the radio that there was a contact and that the guys were busy pursuing them to the fence, but I never had any contacts as such.
Can you give us an overview of how many kilometers or miles of fencing was laid? Because if I'm not mistaken, it was right from the northeast all the way down to Crook's Corner, and then it was east of Vic Falls. I believe it went up along the river there. That bit along the Zambezi River, I've never really managed to confirm that with anybody. Were you ever up that way, east of Vic Falls?
No, I was never at Vic Falls. I would change sites every time I came back from a pass or whatever, so I'd be put with a different set of guys. But no, I actually never went to Vic Falls as such, so I wouldn't know there. It was fairly extensive from what I've heard. I think that must have taken our guys a long time to actually set that up.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe, I don't know where it ended, sort of way north of Inyanga, right? What is the road that Motoko leads to on the border there? Is it Namapanda, somewhere up there? Not an area I'm familiar with, but I think it went Hellengone right to the north, didn't it?
Yes, it did. Big distances. I mean, I think a couple of guys should have started their own fencing businesses after that, because we got to know how to lay fencing and dennet coils
Yeah.
every day. And I think I hear there's a guy who's called Green Leader in South Africa who does fencing and garden services. So I'm sure he was one of the guys.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's interesting, and tell us some more things that you saw while you were serving in that unit, Mike.
Um, we had a number of adventurous type of guys. We had a Greek guy. I'm trying to think of George's surname, but he was actually out to develop what he called a breaching board, which was a board with nails on it, and he would throw it into the minefield or light, and it would set off mines, and hopefully it wouldn't splinter and or whatever it was made of, so that you could put a few of these across and get across the minefield if you needed to get across the other side. It didn't go too far, but he was obviously looking at all sorts of ways to develop this breaching board. As young guys, we were full of bloody nonsense, because we had a lot of the older guys come out to as protection parties. Obviously, our fathers and guys who are just in their 40s or whatever. And of course, they wanted a demonstration of what the mines were inside the minefield. So our guys used to set up a demonstration, but instead of putting one mine, would put two and three in one small hole and drop a sandbag on it. And I think that terrified a lot of the older guys. When they saw that, they thought, these guys are crazy. And we were, to a certain extent, to get into that minefield at 18 years old. Half were sitting on the truck on the road that ran parallel to the minefield, listening to LM radio, where they should have been actually taking more attention on what was actually going on. And we had this pig running up and down the minefield road. So I think that the protection party came out. They thought, these guys have had it. They're mentally not there. You really are not thinking clearly when you're in this environment, because you don't realize until you have an incident like I had with this guy Jimmy Datson, who lost his leg. It traumatized me and the other guys quite badly. He was chopped out, and I still have dreams of looking at his leg hanging like sacking, and him screaming in pain. The other guys that were injured with me, they weren't too bad. I had a few pockmarks on my face, and I had to have one minor up in Mount Dawn, and the other two in Salisbury on my left eye. My hearing was gone for a while. And I think only after you have an incident do you like that, do you realize what have I been doing for the last 8 months or whatever. I've been laying these things, and yet I've put myself in such danger.
Can you explain that incident, Mike? What happened? Did he accidentally stand on a mine?
Yes, he did. What happened was, we were busy laying, and you peel off after you've armed your mine. You peel off behind each other, and move on to the next set of 3 mines that you're laying. Unfortunately, he jumped over a small rocky outcrop where the mines were, and stood on one of his mines, and it knocked the guys that were busy arming back. I happened to be standing about probably 2 meters from him. So I had shrapnel on my left eye, well, in my face and my left eye. There was another guy next to me that also had it. It just stopped everything. And then it traumatized everybody. Obviously, then the medics had to get onto him. They had to get the chopper in, and they casevaced him. In the meantime, the rest of us were just sort of sitting outside the fence in a dwell, wondering what had just happened. And then we were taken through by a Land Rover through to Mount Darwin, and then through to Salisbury. And I actually went to see Jimmy Datson in hospital. Here I was with my patch on my eye, and went to see him, and we chatted and that sort of thing. And I actually started feeling faint in hospital again, just chatting to him, because he was joking about that his leg was itchy. It was actually quite bad, but he was a strong man. And I actually saw him at a later stage again with a false leg. He came back to the border again with a false leg. quite a strong man, and I think a lot of people had a lot of admiration for this particular guy. Um, I was fortunate that my eyesight was good. I didn't have too much of a problem. But yeah, no, thanks the Lord, I'm still around, and I'm still standing, and I'm still fit, and I'm elsewhere. Although I do miss Rhodesia big time.
Oh yeah, I do. It's a place that can just never get out from under your skin. I think those guys that lose their limbs, it's called a phantom memory or something. They can still feel their toes for up to 6 months, I believe, after losing a leg.
Oh, yeah.
And they want to scratch it and everything, but obviously it's the nerves by the knee that are left, I guess, doing that.
Not
But
good.
did you meet a guy down in the southeast? I think he was American. He'd lost his leg, and now he walked around with a built-up shoe with an iron boot on. I think he was American. He was quite a character. When I first got there, he took the piss out of all the guys who arrived in the area. He walked into the minefield, which hadn't been laid yet, stomping the ground with his iron boot, and we were all sitting there shitting ourselves, waiting for a mine to go off, and then he'd come out laughing his head off, and we were all crapping ourselves. But yeah, he was a wild character as well.
I was there when we had just left when Brother Bing, who was quite famous, was around. I've since heard that he's no longer around. I don't know, but Brother Bing was there. He came to our site, and I don't know how he became famous. I don't know, but he looked like a bushman, just wearing a loincloth and running up and down. Yeah, I think he obviously he'd gone bossy, definitely. But yeah, no, there were some characters out there. No, I didn't meet this American. The Irishman was the only one that I met who was a regular. But yeah, Jimmy Datson's still around.
And did you meet Bernie Auditory?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
We, there's so many people that you meet that you remember at a later stage. We actually had a camp where Ron Reed Daly and Walls came out as well, and where I think we were there with the Air Force guys at Mount Darwin, and Clem Thollet was also there in the guard room, and there was a number of guys that we were quite famous out that way, but obviously we were just troopies, so they really didn't worry about us.
Yeah, Bernie was. I became mates with him up near the Wanky area, and we got up to a bit of mischief together and all that sort of stuff. And then the next thing I heard, he'd lost his leg on a railway line, I think, and clearing a railway line. And then I think he actually opened one of these mine lifting companies after the war. He went all over the place lifting mines, saving lives.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh. No, I don't know. I didn't really want to go back into the minefield again after the time that I'd spent there.
Yeah. And part of an engineer's role is to blow things up. Did you ever have to blow anything up, either to get it out the way or demolish a small footbridge or anything of that nature?
We had a number of sites that we did blowing up of. We had cordite that they would wrap around trees. We had one of the best things we really enjoyed, I think, which I did enjoy, was during training. They actually blew up a railway line, and we watched them do that, and that really got us interested in as regards blowing up things. But no, we didn't have any major things that we blew up.
Yeah, because the bottom of a champagne bottle's perfect for putting in plastic and then detonating that to cut a railway line.
Really? Yeah.
What technique did they use when they showed you?
I'm just trying to think. It was right during basics. So right during the basics of engineers. I can't remember what technique. I know we were taken quite far back from the railway line that they were actually blowing up. So I don't remember that. I actually did have the only experience I had with railway lines and trains was I was on guard in Llewellyn at late at night, and all of a sudden a train arrived, And the guys opened the gates, let the train through. It must have been about 2, 3 in the morning or something. And we thought, well, that's unusual for them to be arriving now. But anyway, and it came through, and it had on the truck arms and trucks from South Africa that were arriving. So I think South Africans did help us a lot, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I
that
recall hearing of an ammo train that was like a mile long or something that pulled up in Gwela and took 100 guys a day and a half or 2 days to unload it. There was so much ball ammunition.
yeah.
But these things you only hear about. I can't verify it, but you know, it's 50 years ago. But I've tried to keep my memory fairly straight on things. So what else did you get involved in? Did you ever get attacked by any tours or have the risk of them attacking you when this was going on?
No, well, I was very fortunate from that point of view. I was never attacked. I'm no big hero or anything like that at all. I basically the only time I really worried was when they took a shot at us at Charlie when the guys were busy doing the fencing, and then everybody was told do not shoot back. It was just them trying to give us a bit of a warning shot from the other side. But no, I have never been chased by. I wasn't chased by any guys, and I had friends from the area where I grew up who were in SAS, and they told us a few stories when we met on Pastogan on how they had contacts and that sort of thing. And obviously, the infantry guys I think they had that 2-day op or something with Green Leader, where they actually had where they chatted to Lusaka chaps to warn them that no planes were to take off while they had an operation in place.
That's right.
Quite a few of my guys. Quite a few of the guys that I was with went over, they went through and did that 2-day operation, came back and they were finished. We were back in camp relaying when everybody came back again. Vehicles were taken across and everything. And they went in and I don't know who they actually took out at that stage. I can't remember. My memory fails me. But we had to relay when they came back across again. But that's quite famous, that Green Leader.
Oh yeah, that was the attack on Westlands Farm. Green Leader. Yeah. And Green One, I can still hear his voice telling the tower at Mumbwa not to let any Zambian aircraft intervene. Do you copy? Roger, copy, the tower said. I've got the tape here somewhere. I've also got a tape of a hawker hunter attacking the hill at the casino hill that was attacked east of Mtoli. Lovely hearing these 30mm cannons opening up on the thing. Now, I must try and find that because it's quite a rare tape. I'd like to publish it. Did you get any feedback from guys you trained with as to what they got up to and what they saw and did? Did any of them go on to bigger and bigger things like in Mozambique or anywhere?
No, they didn't. The only time really, well, I was just thinking back on what we've just spoken about. I do remember I was going to a farmhouse and there was an older guy who was retired and he lived on his own and he made jams and all sorts of things. He was up near Mtali. He had a whole lot of black ladies who looked after him, and they all of a sudden one night vanished and he couldn't figure out why. The next minute, this is what I'm told from the next minute, these guys arrived and shot a few people and killed him, from what I'm told. And we arrived the next day, and RAR had already been there. Their stick had been there and were in pursuit of these particular guys. But this poor guy couldn't figure out why none of his carers were around, and that was that. They shot a few people.
They probably abducted them or something like that.
Yeah.
Now, when you'd finished a day's work, let's say you're right in the middle of the shut-in, did you have to get on a truck and drive miles back to camp, or did you sleep where you finished work at the end of the day?
No, we drove back to the camp. We drove back to the camp because we wanted to reload up on the vehicles with what mines we were taking out the next day, because we would get up so early. So no, most of the time we drove back.
Was there not a risk in the tourists getting in and pinching some of your mines, or leaving a nasty for you when you came to work the next day?
Maybe, but I mean, the vehicles were all parked in the camp itself. So it was guarded. So, we had guards all night and that sort of thing in the camp. We did have instances where the guy actually had a somebody, I don't know why, had a generator near this one small camp, and they actually put sand in the generator because it was being kept near the riverbed. That was really where, so obviously somebody snuck up and did that. But no, we most of the time we drove our vehicles back, loaded them, kept them in the camp. We had full guards around us, and then the guy slept, and then obviously got on a vehicle again and went out early morning to go and start relaying.
I can imagine, because that's a dangerous, repetitive job, that a fair bit of the old alcohol must have snuck in on the reruns, eh?
Oh, gee, you know, can imagine. Some of our guys did not have tents, so they actually built these type of bivouac things out of matting, and they had sandbags around on a veranda. So I don't know where one of them found a skull and put a candle in the skull and everything. And when our protection force came out, they thought, gee, but no, these guys have definitely had it. Wild music playing, smoking a weed. And they thought, well, you know, and these are the sort of guys that are protecting us, and this is what they're getting up to. I'm not saying it happened every day, but yeah, no, it was something that happened often, and you've obviously got to sort of try and forget about where you are, what you're doing, or try and enjoy it. Sit back and listen to Rodriguez, a couple of guys, Mark Robinson, Mark Tills, Kevin Keatley, all sit there and play guitar, and we'd hear Rodriguez songs and that sort of thing. And that was the enjoyable part of it in the evenings.
Yeah, very much so. That camp life at night is fantastic. And
yeah,
if your boss man's not too strict, you could go over the 2 beer limit and have a bit of fun. But so long as you don't, you get so lubricated that you can't do your job the next day and blow people up. That's not wise.
Well, exactly. And we had at the one party we had a coloured party next to us. They weren't with us, but they were right next to us, camped. And one of the guys got so drunk that he wanted to shoot one of his compatriots, and so they chained him to the tree for the night till he sobered up. And that to us was pretty bad. I think that must have shocked a few of us as well, you know.
Yeah.
And those guys, I still remember some of these sayings, you know, that stick you with a goni or whatever, you know, and you had to think, well, you know, let's be careful of these guys. Obviously, there were some really nice guys as well, but one or two rough eggs.
Yeah. I don't know if this is protocol to say this on here, but one of my guys had an AD about 1.5 inches from my ear, and I had him handcuffed to a water tower for 48 hours. I said, you can take my punishment, or you go to DB for 28 days. So he said, but what I didn't know until years later is that the guys came out of the A-frames at night, and they fiddled with the locks on my handcuffs, and he was out in 5 minutes. And went back into the A-frame and had a kip. And then in the morning at 5:30, he went and snuck back again. I only found out about that years later. But yeah, there's a lot of humor in the army. Did you do anything? Yes. Did you do anything humorous with explosives? Like the last guy I've interviewed, he put some explosives in the trap where the guys did all their craps and everything, which he didn't know had produced methane. So when the bomb went off, it just blew the whole place to pieces. Did you have anything like that?
We had those long drop toilets as in one or two places, one or two sites, and of course the guys would wait till somebody's in the long drop toilet and then run up with a battery out of a radio and hit the toilet. And if you're inside there, let me tell you, you just about fall down the long drop because it is so loud inside there with one of these big batteries out of one of the radios. We actually had an instance, I don't know how true it was, where we were also in the Antalya, I think, where the guys had those desert lilies, and you stood and had a pee into the desert lily, and somebody apparently had found some young lady was watching from distance with binoculars. So that went around. Whether it was a story or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I do remember Antalya quite well because I had a putty fly into my leg because from the washing fly they call it, and I had to pull it out, you know. And obviously we had to put up a tsetse flies and all sorts of things along the border, hitching you through your combat jacket and that sort of thing. So there were quite a few drawbacks as regards being on the border there.
I had a drawback with a horsefly, tsetse fly, whatever you want to call it. It was literally a drawback. I dropped my rods and I was doing a number 2. And the next thing, I was flying through the air, screaming off at the top of my lungs because this thing had sawn into the end of my cherry, and there was blood squirting everywhere. I mean, every two within 50 miles could hear me. Damn, it was painful. But
Gee.
insects can give you some really fun times in the bush, can't they? I mean, we used to get loads and loads of ticks, and I carried a little magnifying glass, and we used to pull out where our boots met our denims. We would burn them off with a magnifying glass, watch them squirm. It was great
Oh,
fun.
no, no. You still today. I still have a phobia about having wearing wet clothing. Because of getting up in the morning and your clothing's wet and damp and that sort of thing. And it still affects me today. I can't wear wet clothing at all. If it's slightly, I just feel it's not dry enough. It has been dry long enough or whatever. I still have a phobia about that. And that was obviously from the army days.
Yeah, yeah. And were you there during that period where it didn't stop raining or had Gucci for, I think it was about 8 months? It just never stopped.
Stop
People's
raining, yes.
uniforms were going, our skin was going green and growing mold. And it was during the period of continuous call up. Were you a regular or you were on?
No, I was called up for 12 months.
Yeah.
Then 4 days before we were due to, I think it was 4 days before we were due to pass out, they called us up again. And then again, they called us up. So, of course, I believe the Minister of Defence came out to see the guys and I was given some choice words by certain people because we were banking on getting out. And straight after that, last time, we left the country. I went to South Africa because my father really sold up.
What year was that, Mike? 1980?
So it was just on the on the elections, I think it was. The guys are sitting on top of buses, waving branches, and just on that. And we got out.
I think that was one of the worst experiences of my life during that whole period because I was in the police in Salisbury by then. I'd left the army and become an instructor with party. And I used to go home every night with my wife. She worked at Founders Building Society and we lived in Mablerain or someplace.
Did you?
And we always used to have these guys running up to your car and giving you a middle finger, and because they knew what was happening, and they would stand in the road, and it's just you and your wife going along, and it was terrible. It was a very uncertain period that, and then all of a sudden we no longer had any arms or ammo to protect ourselves. It was quite frightening.
Yeah, you were in BSAP. Did you ever know Mike Hines, my uncle, or my other uncle, Ginger Garland? He was with Mike Lamborn, the weightlifter.
Right, I was based at Morris Depot.
Yep.
And as an instructor there, and I didn't. The only guy I knew was Paul Schewel, who was I don't know what rank he was. I forget, quite a high rank. And then some other instructors. I never got involved with the more regulars. I wasn't a regular, even though I'd signed on for a certain period of time. I was what you call, keep losing the word. I was like ad hoc instructor, for want of a better word. I was there month on month on month. I just
with part two as well, because my brother was with part two.
Yeah, and I used to go out with that guy from the Second World War, Reg Seekings, and he was one of the founder members of the British, or the SAS, and he was really interesting. If it was a particularly hot day and we didn't want to go and blow things up or make guys go through jungle lanes, we'd say, "Hey, Reg, give us a story," and that was it for the rest of the afternoon. We'd all be sitting under trees listening to his pursuits with the Germans. It was really fascinating.
But what I couldn't understand was we were fighting against guys who were trained in Russia, China, Cuba. I mean, and really, as I said in my run up there, what really upset me was when those people were killed on the plane, when the plane shot the plane down. 38 people, and then another 10 were murdered, even though they'd survived the plane, and the world went silent. As I said, that really made me a little bit bitter about my British heritage. As I said to you, my father, my grandfather were all in the British Army, and it really upset us and my father as well, what had actually happened. And we were committed Catholics, and my father went to the Catholic Church and said he's not giving any more money to the church because he had heard that they were supporting, the World Council of Churches was supporting Robert Mugabe and his chaps and Zipra.
Very much so. Yeah, I often used to eat pilchards and stuff in base camps that tourists had left food behind, donated by Sweden and all that sort of stuff,
Yep,
and
yep,
World
yep.
Council Church and stuff. It was appalling. It really was a betrayal. My dad's a POM, and but I've now that I'm living in England, I've come to realize that many, 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 many of the ordinary Brits are good people, but the governments have been particularly nasty people. Often backstabbing,
Yeah,
to the point where they break promises and that type of stuff, which I
that's
think
terrible.
it's
Terrible.
it's such a contrast to um, the outward appearance of the British government that always look, polite and talk nicely, but behind the scenes, quite often they were shafting you.
Well, I was thinking back on the day that I was still in the army, and the Lancaster House Agreement and Ian Smith. I came back to their electrical business and told my dad that they just laid it out on a board to say that there would be majority rule in 2 years' time, and that Ian Smith was going to be talking that night. And he said, "You can't be serious." I said, "I'm telling you, that's exactly what's going to happen." So he watched the speech, and after that, he said, "If rule and order is going to break down, which I think it will." He then started putting things into place as regards getting out. And we left our electrical business. The phones were still ringing. We closed the doors, got into a 1968 Valiant and drove into South Africa.
Gee, I remember that electrical shop because it's out where I lived with my wife. I remember it.
Stortford Parade.
Yeah, there was like a curved road was Stortford Parade,
Correct.
wasn't it? With the
Correct.
shops there. Yeah, just
Yep.
left of centre, if I remember correctly. Wow,
Yep.
that's amazing. It's a small world. And
I have a story that might interest you. I just come out the army on a pass, and my father had a friend called Billy Hamanel, and he owned Doves Morgan Funeral Services in Salisbury. Now, at that stage, Robert Mugabe's chaps had shot 4 priests and 3 nuns at a missionary, and they were running a hospital, and they had care for a number of people. They had a school there for the black people, and these guys arrived and killed everybody. And Billy Hamanel had 4 priests and 3 nuns. He had to borrow hearses from the opposition, and he needed drivers. So I was offered the opportunity to drive one of the vehicles. So obviously, he asked me to drive the lead hearse, which is this big $10,000 Cadillac. And obviously, coming from a Catholic family, I don't know if my family was that happy about it, but anyway, I drove the lead hearse down. They now call it Samora Michelle Avenue, and I had nearly ran over a photographer from Time magazine lying in the road taking photographs. We then went to the Catholic, one of the Catholic churches, and we had to park our hearses and put the key in the back door, and carry the hearses, carry the coffins through to their sites where they would be put onto those strapping before they went down into the thing. Well, first of all, I got my hearse stuck in the mud, so we had a problem trying to get the hearse into the right side. We then, all the chaps picked up these coffins, took them forward to the burial sites, laid them on these straps, and Billy Hamanel whispered to me that what I was to do is on either side, on all 4 sides of this of the hole, was where the coffins would go down, was a lever that you touch the lever and it would then drop the coffins down into the hole. I of course said, "Oh, is this what you're talking about?" and touched it. So there was a photograph that went worldwide of all the coffins, except mine was down a bit. Then I said we had to stand around with these big copper trays and sand in them, and the priests and nuns would walk past and take sand and throw it onto the coffin before we lowered them down. Of course, I was standing there holding them, and they would come past and everything, and the local priest who I'd grown up with came past and said, "So this is what you're doing now, Mark." And I had to explain to him that I was just filling in. But obviously he thought, this guy's now gone off the rails. Now he's no longer within the church. He's just doing this sort of thing as a full-time job.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's my claim to fame. I still don't have any photographs from Billy, but I was the lead hearse that was taken, and me driving it in Time magazine. So I've yet to find it. I will look for that, see if I can get it. And obviously, that was the only reason that I got into Time magazine.
Gee, yeah, it's interesting. And where were those nuns and that lot killed? Was it up in Nyanga somewhere?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, right.
As far as I can remember, it was, yes. But I think that was the biggest. They've had a go at Jesuit priests and that sort of thing in the past, but 4 priests and 3 nuns, that was quite heavy.
I
I
could never
actually
I could never understand it because those people helped them. The
They had
one,
a hospital for these guys. Yeah, they had a hospital and a small hospital, and they had a school
yeah,
teaching the children. So why would
yeah.
you want to kill them? But anyway, you know,
One of the guys we hunted down. I've mentioned this before in another talk. Albus Norby. He he decided to go back to his mission near Bulawayo, and they came out in a car and you put a branch across the road. They got out of the vehicle. This is at night to move the branch. He stepped into the headlights and they all said, "Oh, hi, Albert, how are you?" I think it was the priest and 2, 3 nuns in the back, and he just zapped them all. And they'd raised the guy, and it's a demonic mind spirit, state of mind. I can't think of any other reason for hating someone like that.
if they had terrorized you and if they'd tortured you, you
Yeah,
would expect it. But yeah, it's difficult to understand that
mm,
sort of logic behind it.
yeah.
Um, so I don't have any more funny stories like that, but yeah.
That's okay.
Uh,
No, that's fine, Mike. We've had a good chat. It's about 10 o'clock in New Zealand, and it's about 11 o'clock here in England. So
yep,
I want to thank you for coming on board. You've done what a lot of guys are very hedgy about doing for one reason or another. And at the end of all of my talks, if you go back and watch some of them on YouTube, you'll really enjoy the talks. There's a lot of very interesting things on there, Mike. I always
yeah,
put out an appeal to guys to please come forward and talk. I know we're getting older and our memories are sketchy, and some people have said, oh, we should let the past be the past. But no, this is history that is being recorded, and that's the reason why we're doing it. And to also say thank you to the guys that died and that they didn't do it for nothing, you know.
exactly right. So
Yeah,
we were fortunate to make it out, but
absolutely.
yeah, I really feel bad for the younger guys that just didn't make it and
Amen.
made the ultimate sacrifice for us.
Yeah, amen.